My brother whispered, "Whatever you do, don't trust Dad tonight." I laughed. It sounded like one of his late-night pranks, but there was something in his voice, shaky, urgent, that didn't sound like a joke. I brushed it off at first. My father wasn't perfect, but he was still Dad, the man who made us pancakes on weekends, who fixed everything from leaky pipes to broken hearts after Mom died. But that night, something felt wrong. The air in our house felt heavier, colder, as if the walls themselves were listening. A few hours later, when I heard Dad's voice coming from the basement, I froze. He was talking to someone in a calm, low tone. Then, my stomach turned cold, because the voice replying to him sounded exactly like mine. If you like stories that make you question what's real and what's not, make sure to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. My name is Emma Parker, and for most of my life, my family was ordinary. We lived in a quiet Pennsylvania suburb in a 2-story house that creaked when it rained. I worked as a teacher at the local middle school, and my younger brother Luke was 17. A quiet kid, smart, but always stuck in his own head. After our mom passed away last year, I moved back home to help my dad keep things together. Dad, Daniel Parker, was an electrical engineer. He used to be the kind of father who joked about everything and never missed a single one of Luke's soccer games. But after Mom's death, he changed. He started spending long nights in the basement, building something he wouldn't talk about. Whenever I asked what it was, he'd smile faintly and say, "You'll understand soon." At first, I thought it was his way of coping with grief. We all had our own ways. I buried myself in work, Luke withdrew, and Dad built things. Gadgets, circuits, and sometimes ideas that made no sense. Still, we were managing until that Thursday night. It started as an ordinary evening. I came home after grading papers and found Dad in the kitchen, staring blankly at the sink, as if he'd forgotten what he was doing. His hands were trembling slightly. I asked if he was okay, and he just said, "Long day. You two get some rest." Then he disappeared down to the basement again. Luke came into the kitchen a few minutes later, his hair messy, eyes tired. He hesitated before sitting down. "Emma," he said quietly, "something's wrong with Dad." I sighed. "Luke, he's just grieving. He's been through a lot." He shook his head. "No, it's not that. Last night I woke up and heard him talking to someone downstairs. He said my name and then he said yours." "So?" I asked, trying to sound calm. "It wasn't just him talking," Luke whispered. "I heard another voice. It sounded like you. Exactly like you." I stared at him. "You probably dreamed it." He looked at me with eyes full of fear. Then why was I awake when he said, "We have to make sure she doesn't find out"? For a moment, the room felt colder. I tried to laugh it off, but my stomach twisted. Luke had always been imaginative, but he wasn't a liar. I reached over and squeezed his shoulder. Maybe he was watching one of those AI videos that copies people's voices. You know how weird Dad gets with tech stuff. Luke didn't answer. He leaned closer and said softly, "Just promise me you won't go near the basement tonight." After he went upstairs, I tried to distract myself by cleaning the dishes and watching a show, but I couldn't shake what he'd said. Every creak in the house made me tense. Around 11, I noticed the basement door slightly open. A faint light glowed from below, pulsing like a heartbeat. I told myself not to look. I should have listened to Luke, but curiosity got the better of me. I tiptoed toward the door, every step slower than the last. From down below, I heard my father's voice. Soft, calm, almost soothing. "Don't worry, she won't find out." Then came the reply, a voice that made my skin crawl, a woman's voice, my voice. I stood frozen at the top of the stairs, heart pounding so hard I could hear it echo. My throat went dry, my hands shaking as I gripped the railing. The voice that sounded like me said, "I trust you, Dad." That was the moment I realized Luke hadn't been lying. Something was happening in our house that night. Something that couldn't be explained by grief or loneliness. And whatever my father had been building in the basement, it wasn't just a project. It was something else entirely. I stood there at the top of the basement stairs, frozen in place. The light from below flickered against the walls like a heartbeat. Every instinct told me to turn around, to lock my bedroom door and wait until morning. But the sound of that voice, my own voice, kept me rooted where I was. It wasn't a recording. It wasn't an echo. It was alive. The way it spoke, the rhythm, even the pauses. It sounded like me talking to Dad. I leaned closer, careful not to let the stairs creak. "Dad?" I called softly. No response. I waited a few seconds and heard him again, calm and steady. "You'll be safe soon," he said. His tone was kind, fatherly, the same voice that used to tell bedtime stories when I was little. Then came the other voice, mine, soft and trusting. "I know, Dad." My stomach twisted. I backed away slowly, gripping the doorframe for balance. The house suddenly felt smaller, heavier, filled with a kind of silence that wasn't really silence. It was listening. I turned to go upstairs, but Luke was standing at the top of the stairs, his face pale. He whispered, "You heard it, didn't you?" I nodded. "I don't understand what's going on." He shook his head. "I told you, that's not Dad down there anymore." I wanted to tell him not to say things like that. I wanted to tell him everything was fine, but the truth was, I didn't believe that anymore. Something about Dad had been off for weeks. The way he avoided sunlight, the way he smiled too long without blinking, how he kept the basement locked every day until night. I'd brushed it off as grief, but now I wasn't sure. I whispered, "We're leaving. Right now." Luke's eyes widened. "What about Dad?" "We'll call someone in the morning," I said. "Pack a bag, go to the car." He nodded and started up the stairs, but before we could move another step, the basement door creaked open by itself. The hinges groaned slowly, and a strip of warm yellow light spilled across the hallway floor. We both froze. The air smelled faintly metallic, like burnt wires. "Emma?" Dad's voice called from below. It was soft and calm, but something about it made my skin crawl. "Why are you awake?" I forced my voice to stay steady. "I thought I heard you talking to someone." He paused. "Just working. Who was that with you?" Another pause. Longer this time. "No one. Go to bed." Something in the way he said it made my hands shake. I wanted to believe him, but behind his voice, for just a second, I heard a faint whisper, my own voice again, murmuring something I couldn't make out. Luke grabbed my wrist and pulled me toward the stairs. "Please, Emma, let's go." But before we reached the living room, the sound of footsteps came from behind us. Heavy, slow, deliberate steps on the wooden floor. I turned around. Dad was standing halfway up the basement stairs, his face partly hidden in shadow. The light from below cast strange reflections on his features, making his expression hard to read. His eyes looked almost glassy, unfocused, but his voice was steady. "Why are you scared of me?" he asked. "I'm not," I said, though my voice trembled. He smiled faintly. "You've always been brave, just like her." "Like who?" I asked. "The other you." My blood ran cold. Luke stepped in front of me, his voice shaking. "Stay away from us." Dad's expression darkened. "You don't understand. I'm fixing what was broken. You'll thank me soon." He took one more step forward, and I caught sight of his hands. They were covered in faint streaks of dark grease, but beneath that, there were small cuts, like he'd been working with sharp metal. "Go to bed," he repeated. "It's not ready yet." Then, without another word, he turned and went back down the stairs. The door closed softly behind him. Luke whispered, "We can't stay here." I nodded, but my mind was racing. If we tried to leave, he'd hear the car start. If we called someone, there was no proof of anything. And if what we heard was real, then something far worse was happening in that basement. I waited until I heard the hum again from below, the same low vibration that had started everything. I crept toward the door and pressed my ear to it. The hum wasn't mechanical anymore. It was rhythmic, almost like breathing. Luke whispered from behind me, "He's talking again." I listened closely, holding my breath. Dad's voice came through faintly. "You're almost perfect now." Then my voice answered, calm and clear, "Thank you, Dad." Every muscle in my body locked up. Luke reached for my arm, whispering, "We have to get out." But before we could move, something inside the basement hit the wall, a loud metallic thud that made the whole floor vibrate. Then, silence. Luke grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the front door. "Come on!" he hissed. We ran across the living room, our socks sliding on the hardwood floor. I grabbed the doorknob, but it wouldn't turn. It was locked from the inside, but when I flipped the latch, it stayed stuck. Behind us, the basement light flickered again. A faint shadow appeared under the door, shaped like feet standing still. My throat tightened. He's right there. We backed away slowly, hearts pounding, watching the light shift under the door. Then, all at once, the shadow moved, and the voice that came next wasn't Dad's. It was mine. "Don't leave," it said softly. "You're not ready yet." Luke screamed, and I pulled him back. For the first time in my life, I didn't know if I was protecting my brother from my father or from myself. The moment I heard my own voice whisper, "You're not ready yet," I felt something deep inside me snap. Fear gave way to instinct. I grabbed Luke's arm and dragged him toward the stairs. "Go upstairs, lock yourself in my room," I ordered, my voice shaking. He hesitated, eyes wide and wet. "What about you?" I didn't answer. I just shoved him toward the steps. "Go!" He ran, and I stood there, staring at the basement door. The shadow under it had vanished. The house was silent again, but it wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the kind that presses on your skin and makes you aware of every breath. I could hear the faint hum coming from below, the same low vibration, pulsing like a heartbeat. Whatever Dad was doing down there, I had to see it for myself. My hands trembled as I reached for the doorknob. It felt warm, almost pulsing. I turned it slowly, afraid of the noise, and pushed the door open. The stairs stretched downward into a dim orange light. The air smelled sharp, metallic, and burnt, like wires overheating. I took a deep breath and started down. Each step creaked softly under my feet. My flashlight cut through the gloom, revealing the old cement walls and piles of mechanical junk scattered across the floor. My father's tools were everywhere. Screwdrivers, wires, old monitors. But mixed in with them were things I didn't recognize. Small glass tubes filled with a shimmering blue liquid, coils of copper that glowed faintly, and on the work table, a cracked mirror rigged with wires running into a humming metal box. I called out, "Dad?" There was no answer, only that humming sound, steady and slow. My flashlight flickered once, then steadied again. When I stepped closer to the work table, I saw it. Something that made my heart stop. It was me, not a reflection, not a picture, a figure, sitting on the floor in the far corner, knees pulled to her chest, head down. Her hair was my exact shade of brown, her shirt was identical to mine, and her breathing matched mine perfectly. For a second, I thought it was some kind of mirror trick, but then she lifted her head and looked at me. Her face was my face, but her eyes were hollow, unfocused, like she wasn't really seeing me, but seeing through me. I stumbled back, hitting the edge of the work table. The sound echoed through the basement. A door creaked behind me, and my father's voice filled the room. "Emma, what are you doing down here?" He stepped out from the shadows, his face pale and damp with sweat. His hands shook as he wiped them on a rag. "You shouldn't be here." My voice cracked. "Dad, what is that?" I pointed toward the girl in the corner. He sighed, his shoulders sagging. "It's complicated. Try me," I said, my chest tightening. He rubbed his temples, then looked up at me, his eyes glistening with exhaustion. "When your mother died, I couldn't accept it. I kept thinking, if I could just fix one thing, one equation, one mistake, maybe I could undo it. Maybe I could bring her back. But every test, every experiment, it all failed. Until this one." He gestured toward the girl. "That machine connects energy through reflections. It recreates memory patterns, voices, cells, pieces of who we are." I took a step closer, shaking my head. "That's not Mom, Dad. That's me." His eyes filled with tears. "I didn't mean for it to be you. It started with her voice. The system copied her tone, but it found your frequency instead. I could barely breathe. You made that thing in my image?" He nodded slowly. "I was trying to save our family, Emma. You and Luke. I just wanted something real again." The girl in the corner spoke. Her voice was soft and trembling, but it was undeniably mine. "He's telling the truth." I spun toward her. "You're not real." Her lips curved into a faint smile. "Then why do I remember everything you do?" My hands went cold. She stood up slowly, and for a moment, the humming machine behind her brightened, casting flickering shadows across the walls. My father reached for the controls, panicked. She wasn't supposed to wake up fully yet. The machine's glow grew stronger, and I heard the faint sound of static. The lights in the basement began to flicker. My father shouted, "Emma, get upstairs." "No," I said. "You have to stop this." "I can't. Not without hurting her. And if I hurt her—" He looked at me, his face filled with despair. "I might hurt you too." The other me took a step forward. "He's right," she said softly. "We're connected now." I could feel something, like a tingling in the back of my neck. My vision blurred for a moment, and for a split second, I saw flashes that weren't mine. My father smiling at the dinner table, Luke playing with a toy car, Mom laughing in the backyard. Then it was gone. I stumbled back, gasping. "What's happening to me?" Dad's voice broke. "It's the link. She's feeding off your memory." The hum of the machine turned into a steady pulse. The girl's eyes glowed faintly blue. "I don't want to die," she whispered. "I just want to live." My father ran toward the workbench, frantically pulling wires. Sparks flew. The light dimmed for a moment, then flared again. "Emma, run!" he shouted. I grabbed the flashlight and turned toward the stairs. But before I could move, the other version of me screamed, a sharp, piercing sound that made the air vibrate. The glass tubes shattered, blue light spilling across the floor. The machine roared like a storm. For a moment, everything went white. Then, silence. When I opened my eyes, the basement was dark again. Smoke hung in the air. The hum was gone. My father lay motionless on the floor beside the machine. And the girl, the other me, was gone. I called out, "Dad?" But he didn't move. The only sound left was my own shaking breath and the faint, dying crackle of electricity fading into the quiet. The smoke stung my throat as I stumbled across the basement floor, coughing and waving the flashlight through the haze. The metallic scent was thick in the air, mixed with something sharp and chemical. My shoes crunched on broken glass. I dropped to my knees beside my father, shaking his shoulders. "Dad, wake up." He groaned softly, but didn't open his eyes. His pulse was faint but steady. Relief washed over me, but it didn't last long. The machine behind him was still sparking. Tiny arcs of blue light crawled across the wires like veins of lightning. I stood up carefully, my whole body trembling, and looked toward the corner where the other me had stood. It was empty now, just a dark stain on the floor where the light had burned brightest. The cables that once fed into the mirror were melted, blackened at the edges. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing thoughts. Part of me wanted to believe it was over, that whatever that thing was, it had disappeared when the machine blew. But deep down, something didn't feel right. The air was still humming softly, like a faint whisper vibrating in my ears. I turned back to my father, who had begun to stir. His eyes fluttered open, glassy and confused. "Emma?" he croaked. "I'm here," I said, helping him sit up. "You need to rest. The machine, it's gone." He shook his head weakly. "No, it's not gone. Not yet." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "She's gone, Dad." He looked around, panic rising in his voice. "You don't understand. It wasn't just her. It was you. You were both connected. If the link broke, wrong. She could still exist somewhere else. Not here, but close." A cold chill ran through me. "That's not possible." He reached out and gripped my wrist with surprising strength. "Emma, listen to me. If she finds a way back..." His sentence broke off. His eyes widened suddenly, staring at something behind me. "No," he whispered. I spun around. The mirror on the work table was cracked, but its surface was no longer dull. Faint ripples moved across it, like water disturbed by wind. And there, just for a second, I saw my own reflection move when I didn't. The face in the glass smiled. I froze. The flashlight flickered in my shaking hand. My reflection tilted her head, studying me. Then her voice came, soft and calm, echoing faintly through the basement. "You tried to erase me." I stepped back, shaking my head. "You're not real." She smiled wider. "Real is only what you remember." I could feel my heartbeat pounding in my ears. "You're not supposed to exist." Her voice deepened, layered with something distorted, almost mechanical. But I do, because he made me from you. My father tried to pull himself up, shouting, Emma, break it! Smash the mirror! I grabbed the hammer lying near the workbench, but before I could swing, the reflection moved first. Her hand shot out from the glass, smooth and pale, grabbing my wrist. The touch was ice cold, but solid. She stepped halfway out of the mirror like it was liquid, her body forming out of flickering light and shadow. Her face was identical to mine, but her expression was twisted with pain and longing. I don't want to hurt you, she said, her voice trembling. I just want to live. I struggled to free my hand, but her grip was too strong. You can't live through me? I shouted. You're not supposed to be here. Tears filled her eyes. My eyes. He said I was meant to replace you. He said you were broken. The hammer slipped from my hand. No, that's not true, I whispered, but I could hear my father sobbing behind me, confirming everything. The other me looked at him with fury. You lied to both of us. Please, my father begged, crawling closer. I didn't mean for this. You're both my daughters. Her voice cracked. No, I'm your mistake. Before I could react, she turned toward the machine. Sparks shot across the room as she pressed her glowing hand against the exposed wires. The air erupted with blinding light. My father lunged forward, grabbing her arm, but the instant he touched her, both of them were thrown backward by a surge of energy. I screamed. The light was so intense that I had to cover my eyes. The basement roared like a thunderstorm trapped underground. When it finally stopped, I lowered my hand and saw them both lying still. The mirror had shattered completely, shards glittering across the floor like pieces of ice. The machine was silent now, smoke curling gently from its core. My father wasn't moving. I crawled toward him, shaking his shoulders again. Dad, please, wake up. No response. His eyes were closed, his chest still. Beside him, where the other version of me had been, there was nothing left but faint scorch marks and a single strand of hair identical to mine. I knelt there, sobbing quietly, my voice echoing through the empty basement. The house above us was silent. The hum, the whispering, the mechanical heartbeat, all of it was gone. For the first time in months, there was peace. When the sun began to rise hours later, its light crept down through the basement window, washing over everything. The broken glass, the tools, and my father's motionless hand. I sat beside him, exhausted, hollow, and numb. I buried him 2 days later, beside Mom's grave. The doctors called it cardiac arrest. The police found nothing suspicious, only a destroyed workshop and signs of an electrical fire. They said grief can make people do strange things. No one mentioned clones or machines or voices. I wanted to believe it was over. But that night, as I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, brushing my hair, I caught something that made my blood run cold. My reflection blinked, half a second later than I did. I dropped the brush, staring at the glass. The reflection smiled faintly before matching my expression again, as if testing the boundaries between us. The air around me felt colder, heavier. I whispered, "You're gone." And from somewhere deep inside the glass, the faintest echo replied, "Not yet." That was the last time I looked directly into a mirror, because after everything that happened, I'm no longer sure who's looking back. Morning sunlight spilled through my curtains, warm and golden, but it didn't feel real. The world outside seemed quiet, too quiet, as if it didn't know what had happened, or didn't want to. My body ached, my mind felt foggy, and yet I couldn't escape the one thought that looped through my head. Did I really survive that night? Or did she? I hadn't slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of that blinding blue light, my father's face contorted with fear, and the mirror shattering into 1,000 burning pieces. When I finally forced myself to get out of bed, the house felt like a tomb. Every sound, the creak of the floor, the hum of the refrigerator, made my heart race. The walls still smelled faintly of smoke from the basement. The police had already come and gone, shaking their heads sympathetically. They'd ruled my father's death as accidental, caused by electrical malfunction. They'd said the basement was too damaged to determine what exactly had caused it. When I told them about the machine, they just looked at each other and told me grief can make memories blur. I didn't argue. How could I? Even I wasn't sure anymore what was real. Luke stayed with me that first night. He didn't talk much. The boy who used to make sarcastic jokes about everything now sat in silence, his hands shaking whenever the floor creaked. I tried to act normal, to make breakfast, to ask about school, but it felt forced. At one point, he looked up from his cereal and said quietly, "It's really over, right?" I wanted to tell him yes, but I couldn't. I just nodded and said, "We're safe now." That afternoon, I went down to the basement for the first time since it happened. I didn't tell Luke. The police had taped the area off, but I stepped over it anyway. The air was still damp, and shards of glass glittered on the floor. The machine was gone, completely melted down to blackened metal and wires. There was no mirror anymore, just a dark burn mark on the concrete wall. I crouched down and ran my fingers over the spot. It was cold, unnaturally so, as if something had drawn all the warmth out of the air. My reflection in the broken shards stared up at me from different angles, each fragment showing a slightly different version of my face. I suddenly felt dizzy and stood up fast, knocking one of the pieces aside. It clinked across the floor and landed face up, catching the dim light. And for half a second, I swear the reflection smiled before I did. I ran upstairs, locking the basement door behind me. Over the next few weeks, I tried to rebuild my life. Luke moved in with our aunt, and I stayed behind to sell the house. I told myself it was just a building, that it didn't hold power over me anymore. But strange things kept happening. Every night around 3 a.m., the same soft hum I'd heard in the basement started faintly through the walls, low, rhythmic, like a heartbeat coming from somewhere deep under the floor. I told myself it was the pipes, the wind, my imagination. But then, one night I woke up to my own voice whispering my name. It was so faint I thought I'd dreamed it. Then I heard it again. "Emma." The sound came from the hallway. I froze, staring at the half-open door. My throat went dry. I didn't move until morning light finally broke through the window. When I checked, there was nothing there, just the echo of that single word still hanging in my mind. After that, I couldn't stay in the house any longer. I sold it within a month and moved to a small apartment across town. The first few nights there were peaceful. I started teaching again, tried to find comfort in routine. For a while, it worked, but the quiet never lasted. One evening, while brushing my teeth, I caught something in the bathroom mirror. My reflection wasn't perfectly aligned. It was just a fraction off. The movements were the same, but the timing was wrong, like watching an old video out of sync. I told myself I was just tired, turned off the light, and walked away. But as I closed the door, I heard it. My own voice, soft and distant, whispering from the mirror, "Don't leave me." I dropped the toothbrush and ran out of the bathroom, slamming the door shut. My heart pounded so hard I thought I'd faint. I sat on the floor until dawn, staring at that closed door, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. The next morning, I covered every mirror in the apartment with sheets. I couldn't bring myself to look at my reflection again. It's been 6 months since then. Sometimes I almost believe I'm free. I go to work, I meet friends, I laugh again. But there are moments, tiny, fragile moments, when the world slips out of sync, when I reach for something and feel a hand move just before mine, or when I pass by a window and catch my reflection watching me instead of moving with me. Maybe it's guilt, maybe it's trauma, or maybe my father was right. That connection between us was never broken, just buried somewhere deep. I tell myself that the other me burned away with the machine, that she's gone forever. But at night, when everything is quiet, I sometimes hear that faint hum again. It's softer now, almost soothing, like a lullaby. And sometimes, in that half-awake place between dreams, I hear her whisper, "We're the same, you and I. You just took my place." I don't answer her. I can't. Because if she's right, if some part of her still exists inside me, then maybe I'm not the same person who walked out of that basement. Maybe I'm just what's left of both of us. So now, when I pass a mirror, I don't look too closely, because I'm afraid of what, or who, might look back. If this story gave you chills, Make sure to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. I'd love to hear what you think. Was she really gone? Or did she take my place?